I arrived at the mansion of the wealthy Thompson family on a crisp autumn morning, called in to investigate the disappearance of a valuable family heirloom. As I stepped out of my car, I glanced at the jar of pickles in my hand and took a quick bite before making my way up to the front door. The Thompson family was waiting for me in their opulent living room, looking worried and agitated. Mr. Thompson, the patriarch of the family, was pacing back and forth while his wife and adult children looked on with concern. "Detective Smith, thank goodness you're here," Mr. Thompson said as I entered the room. "Someone has stolen a family heirloom, and we have no idea who could have done it." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Tell me more about this heirloom. What makes it so valuable?" Mrs. Thompson chimed in. "It's a necklace that has been passed down through our family for generations. It's made of gold and diamonds and is worth a small fortune." I nodded and made a note in my notebook. "And when was the last time you saw the necklace?" "We had a party here last night, and I noticed it was missing this morning," Mr. Thompson said. "We've searched the entire house, but it's nowhere to be found." I asked a few more questions and learned that the Thompson family had recently fired their longtime housekeeper, a woman named Maria Rodriguez, who had been with them for many years. Mrs. Thompson mentioned that Maria had seemed upset and angry after being fired, and they wondered if she could have had something to do with the missing necklace. I made a mental note to speak with Maria and began examining the house for clues. My exceptional sense of smell led me to the bedroom, where I noticed a strange scent emanating from the jewelry box. I carefully examined the box and discovered a few stray hairs that didn't match anyone in the Thompson family. I bagged the hairs as evidence and continued my investigation. I spent the rest of the day speaking with the Thompson family, searching the house, and questioning Maria. As I pieced together the clues, it became clear that someone had indeed stolen the heirloom. But as I delved deeper into the case, I began to suspect that the culprit was not who I had initially thought. I spent the rest of the day following leads and trying to piece together the puzzle of the missing heirloom. I interviewed the Thompson family, including the teenage daughter, Emily, and the fired housekeeper, Maria. I searched the house for clues, examining every nook and cranny for any hint of where the necklace could be. As I worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. There were too many inconsistencies in the stories I was being told, and my gut told me that the truth was being hidden from me. I decided to pay a visit to Maria Rodriguez, the fired housekeeper. I found her in her small apartment, surrounded by boxes as she packed up her belongings. She seemed surprised to see me, but agreed to answer my questions. "Miss Rodriguez, can you tell me more about your relationship with the Thompson family?" I asked, taking out my notebook. Maria hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I worked for them for many years, and I thought we had a good relationship. But when Mr. Thompson fired me, he didn't give a reason. He just said it wasn't working out and gave me a severance package." I made a note in my notebook and continued questioning Maria. As we spoke, I noticed a faint smell of alcohol on her breath and a bottle of vodka on the counter. I made a mental note to check into her finances and see if she had any debts or financial problems. As I wrapped up my interview with Maria, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something from me. I decided to pay a visit to the Thompson family's teenage daughter, Emily, to see if she had any insight into the case. I arrived at the Thompson mansion and was shown to Emily's room by the housekeeper. Emily was lounging on her bed, scrolling through her phone, when I entered the room. "Miss Thompson, I'm Detective Jack Smith. I'm here to ask you a few questions about the missing heirloom," I said, taking a seat across from her. Emily looked up at me, seeming annoyed. "What do you want to know?" I asked her a few questions about the heirloom and her relationship with the family. As I spoke with Emily, I noticed a strange smell emanating from her bedroom. It was a familiar scent, one that I had encountered earlier in the day. I frowned, deep in thought. Could this be the key to solving the case? I left Emily's bedroom with more questions than answers. The strange scent I had noticed was familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. I decided to return to the Thompson mansion and speak with the rest of the family to see if they had any insights. As I questioned the family, I noticed that Emily seemed particularly agitated and defensive. She kept insisting that she knew nothing about the missing heirloom, but something about her behavior seemed off. I decided to do a little digging into Emily's financial records and discovered that she had a gambling addiction and was deep in debt. It seemed like a motive for stealing the valuable heirloom, but I needed more concrete evidence before I could bring her in for questioning. I returned to Emily's bedroom and searched for more clues, using my exceptional sense of smell to guide me. As I searched through her drawers and closets, I found a small jewelry box hidden under a pile of clothes. Inside the box was the missing heirloom, along with a note from a pawnshop offering to buy it. I couldn't believe my eyes. Emily Thompson was the culprit. I called the Thompson family into the room and confronted Emily with the evidence. "I can't believe it," Mrs. Thompson said, tears streaming down her face. "Our own daughter stole from us." Emily broke down and admitted to stealing the heirloom to pay off her gambling debts. I arrested her and returned the heirloom to the Thompson family, but as I left the mansion, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this case than met the eye. I pulled out my jar of pickles and took a quick bite as I thought about the case. What was the strange scent I had noticed in Emily's bedroom, and how did it connect to the missing heirloom? And what other secrets was Emily hiding? I returned to the Thompson mansion the next day to wrap up the case and return the heirloom to the family. As I spoke with Mrs. Thompson, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than I had initially thought. "Mrs. Thompson, I have a feeling that there's something you're not telling me," I said, taking a bite of my pickle. "Is there anything else you can tell me about the heirloom or Emily's behavior leading up to the theft?" Mrs. Thompson hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I guess there is one thing. Emily has been under a lot of pressure to live up to the expectations of our family. We're very wealthy, and she's always felt like she has to prove herself. I think that's why she got into gambling in the first place. She wanted to show that she could be successful on her own." I nodded, understanding now why Emily had turned to theft to pay off her debts. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. As I prepared to leave the mansion, I noticed a strange smell coming from the kitchen. I followed my nose and discovered the housekeeper, Mrs. Garcia, trying to bake a cake for the Thompson family. But she had forgotten to put any sugar in the batter, and the result was a disaster. I couldn't help but laugh at the sight of the poor woman, covered in flour and looking embarrassed. "Need some help, Mrs. Garcia?" I offered, grinning. She shook her head and laughed. "No, I think I've caused enough trouble for one day. I'll just order a cake from the bakery." I chuckled and bid her farewell, still thinking about the missing heirloom case. What other secrets was the Thompson family hiding, and how did they connect to the missing necklace? I left the Thompson mansion, still thinking about the missing heirloom case. Something about the story didn't add up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than I had initially thought. As I drove back to the station, I pulled out my jar of pickles and took a quick bite, trying to clear my head. And then, it hit me. The strange scent I had noticed in Emily's bedroom and the kitchen. It was the smell of baking, specifically a cake with a certain type of fruit in it. I immediately called Mrs. Garcia, the Thompsons' housekeeper, and asked her to meet me at the station. When she arrived, I confronted her with my suspicions. "Mrs. Garcia, I know you're involved in the missing heirloom case," I said, fixing her with a stern gaze. "I noticed the smell of baking in Emily's bedroom and the kitchen, and I have a feeling that you were using the cakes to hide the heirloom." Mrs. Garcia's face paled, and she broke down, confessing to the whole scheme. She and Emily had been working together to steal the heirloom and sell it to pay off Emily's gambling debts. Mrs. Garcia had been hiding the necklace and the cakes and bringing them to the pawnshop to sell. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had suspected Emily, but I never would have guessed that Mrs. Garcia was involved as well. I arrested both Emily and Mrs. Garcia, returning the heirloom to the Thompson family and bringing the perpetrators to justice. As I closed the case, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. My exceptional sense of smell and attention to detail had helped me solve the case and bring the culprits to justice. And as always, my trusty jar of pickles had been by my side, providing both sustenance and a little bit of comic relief along the way. But as I sat in my office, Munching on a pickle and thinking about the case, I couldn't help but wonder about the Thompson family. How had they not noticed the missing heirloom for so long? And why had Emily felt the need to turn to theft to pay off her gambling debts? There were still so many questions left unanswered. I decided to do some more digging into the Thompson family's finances and discovered that they were in deep financial trouble. Mr. Thompson's business was struggling, and they were on the verge of bankruptcy. It seemed that Emily's gambling addiction had been a way for her to cope with the stress of her family's financial problems. I couldn't help but feel a sense of sympathy for the Thompson family. They had been through so much, and it was clear that they were struggling to keep up appearances. I made a note to follow up with them and see if there was anything I could do to help. As I walked home, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. I had solved the case of the missing heirloom, bringing the perpetrators to justice and returning the valuable necklace to the Thompson family. And as always, my trusty jar of pickles had been by my side, providing both sustenance and a little bit of comic relief along the way. But there was always another case waiting to be solved, and I knew that with my exceptional sense of smell and love for pickles, I was ready to take on any challenge that came my way.